He's a genius. He's ironic, iconic, maybe bionic. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Genius. He's a genius.
The year 2016 was not a good year for Sony Pictures. Well, that's putting it lightly. Between hypes like Passengers and The Magnificent Seven underperforming at the box office, and Ghostbusters remake ending up a lesson on how not to market a movie to fans, many in the industry have speculated that Sony's movie and television arm may be chopped off at the elbow in order to save the rest of the corporation's body. And with only Marvel's Spiderman collab and the finale to the Resident Evil movies on the horizon for 2017, Sony finds themselves without a viable movie franchise to hold the company together. Disney, Warner Brothers, and Fox have their comic book franchises respectively. Paramount has brands like Star Trek and Transformers, while Universal has their back catalogue as well as franchises like the Fast and Furious and Jurassic Park series to fall back on. Sony needs a franchise that's their own, one that has brand recognition and potential for sequels. It's a wonder then that Sony has overlooked their strongest asset to their movie business, Sony Interactive Entertainment. Yes, while the future is a bit murky for the film arm, the video game side has never looked better. The PS4 has been able to regain much of the market lost during the PS3 era, and even take into account that the massive backlog of properties dating back to the PlayStation X era. So excuse me while I do my best Amy Pascal and Tom Rothman impersonations and present to you the 5 potential movie franchises for Sony Pictures. Number 5, Medieval. Starting the countdown off, we have one of the lesser known franchises from the PS1 era, with 1998's Medieval. Developed by Sony Cambridge, the story tells the legend of Sir Daniel Furlesque, a would-be knight reawoken after hundreds of years in order to save the land of Gallowmere from the evil sorcerer Zadok. The game unravels in a sea of dry British humour as the less than qualified Dan has to regain his dignity as the true hero of Gallowmere, while at the same time fighting his naysayer hero folk who scoff at the idea of his name being considered legendary, while in reality his biggest battle was against the rogue arrow taking out his eye. What really sells the game, however, in terms of movie potential, besides the wonderfully upbeat yet sardonic at times writing, is the presentation, seemingly ripped straight from the mind of Tim Burton right down to the Danny Elfman inspired score. The universe the movie paints seems to be tailor-made for an animated adaptation. So while we're referencing Tim Burton himself, why not give the franchise to the man responsible for The Nightmare Before Christmas itself? That's right, Henry Selick. I bet you thought Tim Burton actually made The Nightmare Before Christmas, didn't you? Nope. The man responsible for that would also go on to make James and the Giant Peach and Coraline, and while much of the animated fare in theatres in 3D variety films such as the aforementioned Coraline and Paranorman have shown the classic stop motion animation movies can still make bank if presented properly, and with his visionary director and the right script to reflect the whimsical humour of the games, Sony could raise the bar of animated pictures and have a hit that appeals to both kids and adults alike. Number 4, Ape Escape. What's more important that makes a good kids movie in Hollywood? Merchandising! That's right, if Star Wars taught us anything, it's that you can tie your movie to a cute critter to plaster on dolls, plushies alike. You can put derivative tripe and still make billions. Case in point, Universal's own Minions franchise. So why rely on the dated franchise like Angry Birds or emojis? Yes, actually going to be a thing. Oh my god. When you've got only other animals as mainstreamed by the internet as cats and, of course, monkeys! Enter 1999's Ape Escape, a game that may sound familiar in plot. You play Spike, a young child, tasked with capturing super intelligent monkeys using all kinds of cartoony weaponry, being led by the evil super monkey Spectre, with the plotline of a science and intelligence simians run amok. No doubt you instantly flash to Fox's own Planet of the Apes franchise, but this is a kid-friendly parody, aka a homage to the series, in its right hook from the start, where your franchise future lays in its mascots, each monkey in in the game has its own personality. You could yield a commocupar of a premise for franchising and merchandising. In terms of direction, it's easy. Just suggest director Pierre Coffin, as is the man behind the Despicable series, but if we were trying to keep it as in-house as possible, I'm going to suggest Kelly Asbury, the man behind the recent Smurfs movie reboot. The film itself was a huge hit for Sony this year and considered a step up from the previous adaptations of the source material. Director aside, if Sony looks for its next Minions killer, look no further. Number 3. The Getaway. Coming in at number 3 is Sony's take on Grand Theft Auto series with its 2002's Getaway, a game that took the white-hot popularity of open-world sandbox games of the time and served it with a side of fish and chips. My apologies to anybody out there who is English, and yeah, I've got a little apology on the narration there because I didn't write the script. But anyway, in all seriousness, The Getaway took the campy mayhem inducted in setting in GTA's Liberty City and turned it into a dark and gritty crime thriller, set in the real life of London, of course. The game has you play two separate characters of Mark Hammond, a former member of the mob, dragged back into the game thanks to a murder of his wife and kidnapping of his son, and Frank Carter, a rogue detective trying to take down the mob while fighting against a rather corrupt police squad. The depth of the source material is what set this title apart from the previously aforementioned fare. A multi-layered cop drama, reluctant errand boy story that could rise above its video game upbringing and set itself up as the next big action drama if done correctly. There's even potential to work this in reverse and bring the franchise to TV before working up to an eventual movie. Much of this depends on who you type to bring this world to life. And when I think gritty London movies of the mob, I think no more than the man known as Guy Ritchie. Now, before you start laughing at the idea, I know his track record hasn't been the best, even with franchises. Aside from the Sherlock Holmes franchise, the man hasn't made a bankable movie since 2001. But bear in mind that the influences of these movies, referring to both Lock, Stock and Snatch, is evident in The Getaway. Ritchie needs to go back to doing what he does best. The chances of him producing another King Arthur or Man from U.N.C.L.E. should be less likely. Number 2. Syphon Filter. It's ironic that 2017's marks the end of Sony's Resident Evil franchise, when our number 2 candidate started at life being dubbed a Resident Evil clone. In 1999, Syphon Filter took the virus outbreak and story from Resident Evil and took it into a direction less about flesh-eating zombies and more about terrorism and espionage. Gone was the scary survival horror angle, and in its place was a stealth action game about a team of special ops agents, Gabe Logan and Leah Zing, tasked with stopping the evil Eric Romar from unleashing a Syphon Filter virus to the world. The game took much of its cues from the topical Brosnan 007 movies and focused more on a sleek and high-tech atmosphere. In fact, between the emphasis on technology, terrorism and gruff protagonist, you can see much of the series' influence in future franchises. 2 years later, in Fox's 24, in a movie landscape, a protagonist-driven action thriller such as Jack Reacher and Jason Bourne, Syphon Filter could be Sony's answer to the franchise mentioned above, and as the directors will no doubt be easy for me to pick the aforementioned Bourne series director Paul Greengrass, or the series producer or original director Doug Liman. I'm gonna go with the lesser known action director Antonio Fuqua, director of Training Day as well as the Olympus Has Fallen series, and the more recent remake of The Equalizer. Number 1. EverQuest. 2016's Warcraft was a surprise hit for Universal, mainly due to the massive box office it has overseas as opposed to the US. So if Universal can make money off of one of the most successful MMORPGs in history, why can't Sony do that with a game that started it all? Enter 1999's EverQuest, the first mainstream MMO that hit the US. While the game isn't nearly as big as it once was, in comparison to Blizzard's Juggernaut, the brand has name recognition. It's so ingrained that the whole sociological studies was born out of EverQuest, and while many players couldn't tell you what the story of the game is, that's besides the point. The reason why this game is number 1 on the list is twofold. First, the movie market for the fantasy movies is in a bit of a dry spell, ending in Warner's Hobbit franchise, and has left a void in sword and sorcery films that Sony could easily stuff with a title only less synonymous with the genre than Dungeons and Dragons. But what really sets it apart is the previously mentioned titles that summed up in two worlds, shared universes. Marvel has their MCU that has made event films the new rage in Hollywood. Every studio wants to own its own universe of films. Whether or not this could make sense looking at you, Hasbroverse, EverQuest has almost 24 expansions to its core game, as well as spin-off Champions of Nora series. Now picture it, if you will, a series of annual fantasy movies all set in the same universe, but with an indifferent class of characters centered around them, all leading to one big event film. The strength of it is the desire to see all these pieces come together. With the right minds behind it, Sony could have their first fantasy shared universe in cinema. So as always guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave your comments below and let me know if you want to see any more top 5s in this kind of wheelhouse. And as always, give your thanks to Miguel Leon, who wrote the script for this awesome top 5, my constant collaborator and also political advocate. You can check him out, of course, by clicking on the link below on Twitter, or you could check him out on his YouTube channel for past episodes of the Untitled Movie Show. And as for me, this has been Michael Burhan saying to you lovely people that I've got gameplay. Have you?